It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is Jim Eickhoff, President and CEO of Creative Dining Services. Jim joined Creative Dining back in 2015 after 35 years of senior executive leadership experience from his time at Fortune 200 companies across the U.S. This included senior leadership roles at the University of Phoenix, Host Learning, Sallie Mae, and the ServiceMaster Company. Under Jim's leadership, Creative Dining has experienced 50% growth and leaped to the 24th largest food service management company in America. He's the first non-founder serving as president and CEO, and is focused on excellent client experiences by providing dining programs with the highest level of customer service and integrity. Jim is committed to upholding a company culture of family while coaching employees to leverage their unique strengths to reach their highest potential. Jim received his BA in English and secondary education from Hope College. He and his wife Lynn reside in Holland, Michigan. Jim Eickhoff, welcome into the corner office.
Well, thank you very much.
Where does the podcast find you today?
Yeah, we're on the west coast of Michigan, right on Lake Michigan itself. And it's beautiful summer resort time for those that come to visit our beautiful community.
Summer is hit. I love it. Not too hot yet, I hope.
Well, a little humidity, but that lake wind really keeps the humidity down and the temperatures down. So we're loving it.
I love it. Well, let's jump right in. We always start about the early years. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. Great, happy family life. I had a younger brother, younger sister. My parents were both teachers, and during my early childhood, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and being the oldest, I think that was, I think part of that was that relationship with my mom is extremely strong, because she was home. My dad was home in the summers, which was pretty incredible. We did a lot of tent camping in the summer. So when my dad was off, we were as a family got in the car, packed the tent, and would sometimes be gone for 30 days at a time during the
Nice.
summer months. So it was just absolutely fantastic.
My father was an educator as well. And you don't know the difference when you're growing up. But then when you have kids of your own, you're not an educator, you don't have those summers off. You really do get
Yeah,
the contrast.
exactly.
But yeah, that's terrific. And thinking back about kind of maybe some of the inspirations you got, what would you take away from kind of mom and dad's upbringing? It sounds like you had a great
Yeah.
family life.
It's fascinating. My parents just really modeled a great marriage, and an authentic love for each other, to us kids, and they modeled respect. And I think that's had a lasting impression on me, going not only into my personal life but into my professional life. How everyone should be valued and loved unconditionally, and that was something that really um, impacted. Part of that genetic and part of that aura, that who I am, that imprint that you have as a youngster, and then you just see it reinforced throughout my young and adult life, quite frankly. And yeah, so that was just inspiring to me, and the bar was set high with them because as you're looking for a significant other, you kind of say, gosh, I want to find that ideal opportunity with the right person. But yeah, I would say that they just demonstrate too a true joy in what they did. I mean, my dream was at the time was to be a teacher and be just like my dad.
Wow.
He
Great role
was,
model.
I didn't think life got any better than, high school. He was a high school teacher, and that's the goal. I went to the high school that he was a teacher at, which made it even cooler. So it was a great experience.
Now you said your mom taught too. So did she do
Yes.
that a little later in life?
Well, she did that a little in later life, and then really where I got some of that executive exposure was with her. She was a senior officer and leader at the ServiceMaster Company, and one of the early female leaders in the company. And that was when I was in college when she took on that role. But it's very fascinating how she kind of evolved and kind of had that succession planning and career pathways at ServiceMaster back in the day in their healthcare, well, in their management services side of the business. So she gave me a lot of tips. I'm sure, which I'll touch upon later about what do you do when you're aspiring to be a leader in an organization. And she was a good mentor to me in that area.
Other than being a teacher, what were some of the other inspirations that you had as a kid? Were there other things that you wanted to do or that you did
Um,
do?
God, it's just pretty fascinating. I think the other things that inspired me were, I loved sports and athletics. Although the Chicago Bears were quite terrible at the time, just that whole idea of athletes like Gail Sayers and Brian Piccolo, their stories. I am third. My God is first. My second, my family is second, and I am third. There was that book, an early one of the first like kind of big boy books I read, kind of thing, and that just really put that life prioritization. And to me, that was an inspiration of saying, just how do I put my faith in others more above myself, which really has an impact on even on my leadership style today.
I can imagine that there was pressure to be a good student. I know that. I certainly felt that. I
Hmm.
remember my dad used to say getting an A was like getting a good paycheck, Brant. And someday you'll want to thank me for that. I've never forgotten it. Were you a
Exactly.
good student in school? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, at the time, you kind of get a little modest about it because sometimes it's not cool to be, top of the class. But I would say I went to a large high school, around 4,000 students, and I was in the top 1% there. Same thing in college. So, actually school came easy for me, but I loved it. And that's part of it was the passion that I had for, learning, and the passion I had for, not only just the things I liked, but then that challenge to say stuff I wasn't great at. How do I overcome that? So I thought for me, education was just a great example of how you can thrive in what you love. But then if you're challenged, you've got to overcome that to be successful and maintain that standard of excellence that, I would say family, and then some key teachers who were my mentors at the time. You don't want to disappoint them either.
Did you have a favorite subject in high school?
Oh, I loved English. I
No.
I, I love to read. I love to write. I love poetry, which kind of is a juxtapose to the jock that I was. I played high school basketball and football and college football, and it was a little atypical to say, "Gee, I love reading poetry." It's kind of like was it Schroeder, the piano player? On anytime he played a sport, he had to run back to make sure that his hands could still play the piano. For me, it's just it was just a little juxtaposed because I also love musicals and choir. So in the spring, so I didn't say baseball or track. I really enjoyed the music and arts as well. So I participated in school musicals and concert choir events as part of my kind of my well-rounded exposure to life.
Did you have a favorite high school book that you had to read in English class that you recalled?
Oh gosh, it sounds really weird, but it was Beowulf.
Yeah,
It was one of the first um, Old English, and
right.
we had to memorize. I can remember I'm not going to say it on the podcast, but I could probably do the first two paragraphs still from memory from that experience. But just that whole idea of reading something in Old English and then, learning about the history, the context, and the impact that it had on literature and the English literature scene at the time. So yeah, I that was one that that pops right into my mind.
I just recently went back and reread Moby Dick from the first time since 10th grade. And I'll tell you, I've enjoyed it even more now than I did then. Of
Yes.
course, English wasn't my favorite subject, so I had a little bit different spin than you did. But it's just wonderful to go back sometime to some of those things. Huh? Was it clear that you'd go to college? Was that something that mom and dad kind of had for you, or that you,
Yeah,
from an
it
early age?
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was the that's what you did. That was the expectation. Grandparents, parents, and then us as kids. The expectation was you're gonna go to school, and you're gonna make sure that you get your degree, and it provides better opportunity and the like. So yeah, there was no doubt that that was something instilled. And I think part of it's because of the educational family,
Sure.
but that was part of that. It wasn't just to be head knowledge, but part of going on to college was experiencing life outside the home, and you know consequences for decisions. Mom and dad don't have curfews. It's college, and you got there are consequences for not studying, and they're not there to say, did you do your homework? And those are the things that just you learn from a college experience that you can't get back.
Did you work during high school or pursue some entrepreneurial things that you had to kind of set aside some money to save to go to school, or was that?
Well, it's interesting because of the size of the high school I went to. I really couldn't have the normal job
Mm,
in high school. I worked in um, babysitting. Believe it or not, as a
right.
guy, I love babysitting. I was popular with those with young boys because I would wrestle and wear them out and they'd sleep. And some the classic lawn mowing. But those are the kind of the issue there was I just didn't have the time between morning basketball camp and
Sure.
afternoon football camp all summer long. It was park rec, quote unquote. But if you didn't participate, the chances of you playing were not that great. So you're expected to be there. So what could you do midday, and then what could you do in the evening was pretty much where we did it.
You went to Hope College. Now, was
Yes.
that the pre-selected college? Did you apply to quite a few? I know you played some ball as well in college. Tell us about your
Yeah,
selection
I
years.
you know I yeah, my folks were very encouraging to expand. Where do you want to go? What would you like to do? So yeah, I did apply to several schools, got accepted pretty much everywhere I wanted to go, a couple scholarship offers. And a couple Ivy League schools had pursued me a little bit for the sports side and academic side. But Hope was just that perfect fit for me. I felt I fit in from it was smaller than the high school I went to.
Liberal arts college.
Yeah,
Yeah,
liberal arts
yeah.
college, again with my desire to major in English. Small class settings, much more intimate in that area, and I call it the safe distance. It was about 2.5 hours, 3 hours from home, so it was far enough away I couldn't run home if something happened, but close enough where you can get back on long weekends or the holiday type of events without a major travel event.
Now, you didn't go on to become a teacher. I think you joined the ServiceMaster
Yeah,
Company. So I think there's a mom tie-in there. But tell us a
yeah,
little bit about the decision making of not
yeah.
pursuing teaching and going into the business world.
Well, it's so funny at the time. I did have a teaching offer, but I think just kind of unfortunately, like today, even it was the job offers. There were three of them, and the least paid position was the teaching position,
Yeah,
and the gap between that and the service master one was about 8 grand a year.
that was a
And
lot of money back in
back in
'83.
1983, yeah, you're talking, wow, I mean, so that tipped me there. And the other thing, the reason why I liked it was ServiceMaster had a real strong philosophy of training and development and teaching. And so I thought, well, gee, I can use my teaching skills as part of maybe a career pathway to get into their training and development department once I kind of prove my mettle in the management side of the business. So that's really what kind of tipped me in that direction.
And you were with the corporate service master, correct? You
Hmm.
weren't in a franchise operation. Is that
No,
correct?
it was the management services side. Yes,
Yeah, yeah, terrific. And you spent about 9 years there or so.
yes. Hmm.
Did you get people responsibility early on? Tell us a little bit about those early years.
Yeah, it was amazing. You graduate at 22 years old, and my first job, you start out in management, and that was their philosophy. You were going to lead people as part of your first assignment. So my first job at 22 was I was the night operations manager at a hospital with 40 employees under my
Wow.
leadership, so to speak. Which usually it's the other way around. You apprentice, you
Yeah,
work it through, you learn, maybe get in sales, learn about the business. Well, this is kind of a flip,
they
and
threw you in
yeah,
the pool.
you have a very strong leadership development program. It was about a 9-month program that was part of the
Yeah,
onboarding experience in addition to leading. So yeah, that was right away. It was right from college into leading people.
that's great. And I imagine most of these folks were probably double your age, right? 30s and 40s, if not
Yes.
older.
if
Huh?
if not even more so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So how did that fit? And was there some challenges there those early
Yeah,
days?
yeah. I think the interesting thing about the challenges with that is you come out of school with head knowledge and some of the training with head knowledge, but you have the zero experience. When it comes to the reality of day to day. It's like when at college, there's a couple of, folks that were in their 30s, 40s that came back and audited some courses, and they had such a different perspective because they had the school of experience under their belt. And so when you were looking at different um, topics, they're bringing a whole different perspective than just that um, book knowledge. And I
Mm,
think that's kind of where I found um, what I really had to learn, that experience does supersede that. I really needed to be more engaged and listen to the team members that I interacted with. And just because I was, quote, the manager, I really had to set my ego aside.
yeah.
All of a sudden it's like, hey, man, I'm leading people. I'm important. I'm the manager. I'm their boss,
Mm.
that kind of thing. And man, you can quickly get yourself into some challenges by I don't like the word boss, but if you say you're the boss and I'm the boss, I'm your boss, people will obey, but you might not get the respect,
Yeah.
because
Right.
if you overlord because of the title, not necessarily because you've earned that respect. Um, and I found out very quickly, if I get more out of the team when I put them first, put them ahead of myself, and ask questions. And okay, so how would you do that?
Mm.
How would you do that differently? I mean, the best story on this one is there was a night at nighttime you refinish floors, and you learn the book tells you how to, you get trained on how to refinish floors, strip and refinish, and you're doing all that. So I've got all that, how to do it in my head, and I actually did it the way you're supposed to according to the book. And I was watching this guy, Clark was his name, I still remember his name, and he was in his 60s, and
Mm.
he was refinishing the floors and doing his work. And I was kind of then pointing out, wow, he didn't rinse the bucket the certain number of times, and he didn't do this or that. And he politely turned to me and he said, son, he said, are you happy with the outcome of my floors? I said, man, they're the shiniest floors, they're awesome. He said, I have been doing this longer than you've been alive. And he said, with all due respect, you might want to focus more on what's the outcome than about how I may go about doing it.
Great lesson.
And wow, that has really stuck with me from, I think it was that point, I was 23.
Yeah.
That stuck with me to today.
Love it.
You got to learn, it's maybe not how people do it. It's what's that outcome once it's, that's what you're looking for, is a great outcome.
You mentioned listening being a very important part
Hmm.
of generating respect. What other kinds of things did you do, Jim, at that stage that really helped you kind of build that respect with those older team members?
Yeah, I think the one of the key things for me was really um, shining a light on them when
Mm.
success took place. And you really calling them out verbally, calling them out with um, kind of being English guy, I love to write, so handwritten notes. We didn't have, I don't know if sticky pads were invented back then, but or they were, but they were very expensive. So you did a little card, and you might slip it in their locker,
Yeah.
put it on their housekeeping cart, or whatever the case may be. The other thing I did is I took the heat and owned it if the team struggled.
Mm.
Didn't kind of sidestep the issue and say, oh well, the reason why this didn't go right was because of Clark over there, or because of the team. I had so many absent people that I don't know what that group was doing, so I owned it. I owned that, and then just no blaming. I think
Yeah.
those are the things I learned. That, and boy, that respectometer in the dedication, because I don't
Mm.
think a lot of people um, want to point a finger.
They let it
Um,
slide downhill, as we
yeah,
say.
and I just
Yeah.
thought, boy, that's just not cool. And
Yeah.
I wanted to earn the respect, and one way to do that was really to shine on them, and not like I said, the classic thing too, praise in public. And if we have
Yeah.
some concerns, let's close the door, talk it
Yeah.
through, so there's no public embarrassment.
Yeah,
That was a
that's
crucial element for
you
me to
took the
learn.
words out of my mouth. That praise in public, criticize in private. Unfortunately, people forget how important that is
Hmm.
with regards to particularly developing folks. Great. So eight odd years there. That was a good career. What kind of led you to move on and take on the next assignment? Because you spent about 6 7 years there with Host Learning.
Well, I think part of that at the time was um, I had ended up into sales side of it for ServiceMaster, which I never wanted to do that job. I thought, oh, salespeople, you had that stereotype, but I ended up loving sales because it was a concept sale. It wasn't selling widgets or a car or that kind of thing. And my heart still tugged at the teaching side. And my next experience at Hosts was a challenge of twofold. One is they were looking for someone to grow their business, and the second side of that was um, to get back to some of that roots of teaching kids. And Host really worked with that promise kids. I usually call them at risk, but we kind of talked about that at promise kid, the child that or the student who's just struggling,
Mm.
fifth grader at a first grade level, or a first grade who doesn't know their letters and can't read well or add and subtract yet, or some of those fundamental skills. And I really kind of got back into that, a blending of not only a paycheck and a commission check, but then a psychological paycheck.
Mm.
And that's seeing the fruit of your labor, really the impact it had on children's lives, on parents' lives or guardians' lives. And you saw how these kids through our program that I worked with in the elementary and middle schools, how they just turned around, and the tears and the joy. And you said, man, you
Mm.
know what? I don't know what, there's no check amount that could
Yeah.
see how a child who's really struggled in school is suddenly succeeding because it just got to the root of the concept. So for me, it was getting a blend of all of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I was just, it did have that little entrepreneurial because I was the first non, career educator in the company, the first formalized salesperson they hired in. So that for them was like, how do we open up new markets? How do we, you know, set up a public relations group and some of these neat things that gave me that opportunity to, test my mettle a little bit on how do I, take a company who did a fantastic job but grow it from, basically sites in Texas and the state of Washington. And by the time I left there, we were in 32 states and had close to 3,000 clients. So it was pretty cool how that unfolded with a great team, great support network.
One of the things that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Jim, when I was admiring your background, is that you've really kind of weaved your way through two or three, actually four different sectors. And not everybody does that. Folks tend to, maybe stick with one and go to maybe an adjacent one. But you really have done some pretty, extensive right and left turns as you've gone through that. We won't have time to talk about all the, jobs you've had, but you got in the lending industry for a long time before you got to creative dining, and want to approach that next. Tell us a little bit about how you kind of went through that thought process of then going from, the service master, spent the time in education, then went in the lending business before you got into creative dining.
Yeah, I think at that point, for me personally, the corporate world that was driven, and it became so focused on earnings per share and
Mm.
so focused on stock value price and so focused at times to win at all costs that it became a point where almost at times it
A little
breaking
brutal.
records in
Yeah,
sales.
yeah,
You weren't it wasn't good enough. So you had that concept there and this
yeah.
opportunity at creative dining that was a founder run organization. They were looking at how do we get from founder run to that next level.
Mm.
And it's always a crucial period in a company's life because a lot of company founded organizations, the leadership leaves, gosh, the success rate dramatically drops um, due to a myriad of reasons. It was so dependent on the founder, or they weren't just don't have the infrastructure in place to get to that next level, or you bring someone in to say, hey, let's just set this up for sale or an acquisition merger. But they really wanted to keep core to that founder's mentality and and modernize and get the infrastructure in place so that they could then take things to those next levels. And that's kind of where things were back when I started
Yeah.
at Creative Dining almost 10 years ago now.
I can see that could be very attractive, particularly given the Fortune 200, work you've been doing for a few years there. Yeah. What would you say that you had to kind of shift your leadership style as you moved into creative dining and kind of left that corporate, quarterly results type of an organization to the, taking over as really the first outside CEO.
Yeah, and I would say I did have to adjust, and I think the some of the first areas of feedback that the team and the board gave me, quite honestly, was you got to slow down.
Yeah.
And boy, I thought I was going slow. That's the irony. You used
Yeah.
to go 150 miles an hour, and I thought I was going 55. But based on the pace and the conditioned focus that you have, and the energy that you have, to them I was going 190 miles an hour. So, and that's not a bad thing, because we had to have a little push, but then I had to really taper back. And a lot of those lessons that I mentioned earlier about my first management job at ServiceMaster, I needed to relive a little bit with the leadership team at um, at Creative Dining, because I didn't have a food background.
Right.
I was not an expert in food and dietetics and in menuing and in food purchasing and trends. I was solid as a leader, solid with sales and growth and marketing, and so I really had to leverage the talent of the individuals that were here, and many had been here 15, 20
Mm,
years at the time. And I had to say, look, I'm going to learn from you, kind of going back to Clark. I'm going to learn how you run this business. We need to modernize, but you're part of that journey to help that. And I need you to help me understand, if we go this direction with this type of technology approach, or this type of change in people services or operations or sales or in marketing, what's going to be the whack-a-mole impact? What's going to pop up that we may not see, but because of your experience, that we need to make that happen? I mean, I was asked probably 6 months in, when are you going to bring your own people in?
mm,
Kind of like a coaching change. You bring your own assistants in, and I said, I don't have any plan to bring, quote, my people. And I don't really have any my people, because I'm not from the food business.
right. Right.
And you're going to help me and help us make a we plan, because a lot of times a founder-run organization is really founder-centric, and
Yeah.
it all starts and stops there. For me, we implemented, you know, team collaboration. We looked at, accountability, and you can make empowerment. You can make the decisions. It's okay. We think it through. We'll talk it through. Coach you through. You can make the decision, and I'll stand behind you and celebrate you when it's great. If it doesn't work out, we'll chat a little bit about it, but we're going to learn something from it.
Yeah.
And and
Yeah.
and we've grown. We halved again the size of the company in this period of time, because people really bought into that. Hey, you know what? I don't have to worry about my job. I'm worried about, maybe change, but not necessarily Jim's way or the highway
Right.
approach.
What's so interesting too is that you're competing against a lot of big publicly traded,
Hmm.
folks
Yes.
in the dining industry, the Aramarks, the Sedescos, et cetera. And how do you kind of differentiate yourself? Because you're up against those competitors when you're in those clients every day.
Yeah, it's a great question. I get asked that quite a bit. It's just very interesting how um, folks want to say, what's that recipe? Because we win quite a bit of business against competition. I think part of the differentiator is we are smaller. We're not publicly held. We're not publicly traded, and our decisions are made really with the customer in mind.
Mm,
We want to understand what they need, what they want, and we're not squeezing the dollars out of every single element of the business. Um, but aside from that, I think the biggest element is how we treat people. When you're 1,500 employees in our organization, and not tens of thousands of
yeah.
employees, people, we try to create an environment where people are not a number. Um, I know our people; they have access to me personally, through text or through email or whatever. And our corporate team is the same way. Our corporate office was built to support them in the field, not the other way around. Sometimes in big companies, it's like, oh gosh, you know what? We're supporting all the corporate stuff.
Yeah.
How do we serve and support there? And I guess what really demonstrates this is, we had almost 60% of our employees respond to our annual, just a recent survey. And our turnover rate is around 65%. That seems, ooh, that's high for those that don't know, but the industry average is around
It's
125 to
125. Yeah,
130%.
right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's absolutely
It's half.
crazy.
You're half. Yeah. That's
And when
impressive.
we ask them, why are you guys here? Why do you like working for creative dining? 75%, as a base, as the low end in these topics, um, they said that we feel heard. We would recommend creative dining for other people to work at. We feel safe at work.
Mm,
We feel management keeps commitments. We have clear role expectations. And this one really, I think, is in today's world, and I'm real proud of this. 83% of the respondents said it's easy for people from diverse backgrounds to fit in and be accepted.
nice.
We all want to belong, and so we really work hard at how do how do we accept people for that beautifully, wonderfully created individual and leverage their talent to benefit their customer and the company versus here's how we expect, this is what you've got to do. You've got to
Yeah.
change that. We want to hire people because they're unique. And then we blend those unique competencies that people have to make a good solid team.
I love that. Taking over from an owner founder can be challenging. It can also be smooth. It all depends on that relationship. Tell us a little bit about maybe both sides of that. What has been challenging with regards to doing so, and what's been maybe smoother than you've accepted as you've taken over those reins.
I think the big challenge, and it was vocalized a little bit, was the fear of the unknown from
Mm,
staff, thinking that we were, because of my background, was Jim's going to come in and we're going to become too corporate,
right. Right.
and it's interesting, when you define, well, what does that mean? But I think that people were expecting, for me to come in and say, you know what, we're going to run this like a Fortune 100 company. We're going to come in and change how we do everything and how you maybe jobs even, and everyone's going to have to reprove themselves and all that kind of thing. So I think that was a challenge to overcome. I had to earn the respect
Yeah.
again, get that feedback. I think the other challenge was there are some limited resources. It's the organization isn't as big, so you have to say you have to really. The challenge I had was working on what is the most important things that I can do, because I really wanted to focus on initially on infrastructure, because we had very little automated systems and processes, and virtually nothing was a web-based or
Mm,
cloud-based system. So we had to really look at it. How do we change systems in accounting and people services and sales and operations so it's not all paper pencil or Excel spreadsheets and those types of things? You can say let's do them all at once. So the challenge is how do we all agree we needed to get there, but then how do we as a team decide the priority and then put a reasonable timetable together so that we can be successful at it? I think what went smoother than I expected was the receptivity, especially from our clients who saw these things as being very positive. And gosh, it's good to see creative dining making these changes,
mm,
because this is how we operate our
yeah.
businesses. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and the other thing I thought that was, again, go back to the people. Once we built that trust, which I had to do it quickly, boy, were people nice, and boy, did people want to see everyone succeed. And it really was a group of people that said it's a we and a together strategy. And we can learn from you too, which Mike came in saying I got to learn from you. That was
Yeah.
my only expectation was I want to learn from you. But then quickly people said, gosh, you know what, I like what you're saying. Teach me, help me get better, even though I might be 50 years old and have been in the food business for 30 years. Those kind of things. So those are, like, if you want to talk just a high level, a couple things there for each one. That's where I
Love
see
it.
things were.
Jim, how do problems get solved at creative dining, and when do you get involved?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have uh, we're kind of an EOS, entrepreneurial operating system company,
Hmm.
and what
Traction.
we've
Love it.
we've we have really looked at that whole idea of um, we don't have problems, we have issues. And we've really worked through that whole process of how do we work through issues, and we identify them every week. And as a team, we set aside that whole idea that there is no um, titling going on when we attack an issue.
Hmm.
So I'm involved, but part of a team effort on an issue. So let's just say we saw something and we identified it early. We saw turnover, for example, creep up after COVID. Well, before COVID, we were at 49%.
Wow.
Post COVID, now it's 66. At one point, it got to 78%. When it was at 78%, we identified this as an issue. We had to really sit back and talk through as an organization how that worked, and we all had our voice heard. We all had a game plan agreed upon, and we all left with then a focus of saying, here's some things we need to do over the next 6 months to highly impact um, the the turnover rate. And you can kind of see already that we've dropped it from
Yeah.
78 to 66. So
You
that is
basically
something.
put it in an L10 meeting and everybody
Yeah,
talked about it and you
yeah,
said,
every
yeah, yeah,
week.
yeah, I love
And
it.
that was something that we found to be has been very successful for us and
Yeah,
helpful.
love it. What do you do to keep your saw sharpened? What kind of executive development activities do you pursue to?
Yeah, that's a something I think has been very important. I think there's been a couple organizations that I have participated in. One has been Vistage. It's kind of a localized CEO group
Yep.
from the area. You get together, you meet once a month, you walk through. It's a day commitment. I've enjoyed that from a you see things. Um, Objectively as opposed to subjectively, and they have no you know vested interest other
Right.
than seeing you be successful so
Yeah.
you can be
Yeah.
springboard of the group of people. And I think that's important. I think that'd be something I recommend to any CEO. It's a little bit at times extremely lonely. You don't have the same, you really can't worry down, as I call it, because then your team worries. And if you don't catch yourself, then everyone's freaking out about it. So you got to say, okay, who can I talk to? I have an accountability partner that has a leadership organization and a training program that he and I meet quite frequently, and we just kind of walk through, joys, concerns, what's trends are taking place, what are you seeing in other organizations that goes well, things to avoid. So I
Share
think those
books and
are a couple
articles with each
things.
other. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and you need that. It's,
Yeah.
I my best friend, my wife, I do chat a little bit with her, but at the same time, you don't want to burden her down because then she'll kind of like if you worry down, you worry to hers and she's worried. So you want
Right.
to keep things in a good place.
Right. I love it. What do you look for when you're investing and hiring people at Creative Dining Services? What's important to you?
Yeah, we're kind of big advocates of Patrick Lencioni's hungry, humble, and smart.
Yeah.
We've really looked at that as a way to really look at what's that what kind of makes up that person. One of those techniques about do interviews over lunch. How do
Mm.
they behave? How do they treat others? Just that whole idea. So we're really strong proponents of that. One of the big things I look at, especially when you're at our director level, about is team chemistry. We've hired some people that have great chemistry over maybe someone who's had a phenomenal resume. Could have like, man, they got letters after their name, they've got this and that, and they've got this experience. But during that interview process, there just was a little bit of a rub, and I go, man, we,
Mm.
we, we got to have the chemistry, not necessarily the one that knows it all and everything else. And I think that does get into attitude as well. What's the attitude that you have? So that's what I look for. And then the other part is really is a can do, will do work approach.
Love it.
I can do it and we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And we set the jaw and charge forward as a group. I think and we get at that through our interview process and some of our example questions that we want to have for people.
Jim, we're just about out of time, but we
Yeah.
always have one last question we always ask our CEO guests, and that's what kind of career and life advice would you give to someone that maybe is, 20 or 30 years, maybe earlier in their career and has their sights set on the corner office themselves someday?
Yeah, I would, again, I'm Patrick Lencioni fan. I'd really get the book. Just wear that hungry, humble, and smart practice. I mean, it's something that comes through. I'd really encourage you at the organization you're at, build those relationship up and down the organization and laterally, left to right. Earn that respect from your colleagues. It won't happen if you constantly run over them. And I know that as a leader for me, I'm watching, my team and how do they treat other people? Are they using phrases like, well, Jim said, well, that's not a good thing. Take ownership in yourself. So a big tip is never just because your boss says it, don't go to your team and go, well, Jim said I have to do that. That's not a good thing. I would just be consistent in your behavior and the way you treat people. People want to feel respected. People want to make sure they feel loved and belonged. And part of that would be is how you treat them is a big issue, because in today's environments, we do a lot of 360s. We want to get feedback from the direct reports of our leaders and of our supervisors to find out, what is their team feeling about for them. And then I think basically most probably take that heart of a servant leader, and that's really putting the needs of others above your own. And I think that shows that who's more important is you, not me. And that would be my advice to those that are really trying to get to that C-suite or that next level up. Those are some great fundamentals to practice.
My guest today is Jim Eickhoff. He's the CEO of Creative Dining Services. Creative Dining partners with colleges, universities, Fortune 100 companies, full-service senior living communities, conference centers, K-12 schools, and camps, provide a different kind of hospitality and facility management services experience, one that's fun, innovative, and focused on the community. Jim, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thank you.
Hey listeners, we're now including your questions with our CEO guests. If you'd like to send in a voice memo, send it to info@go4roi.com and we'll read it on the air to one of our future CEO guests. Thanks so much for listening, and share it with friends.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.go4roi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.